Mark Rogers is a three-time Associated Press Mississippi Sportscaster of the Year and the owner of 23 years of experience in local and network television as an anchor, reporter, producer, and manager of WNCO, WCBI, and ESPN. During that time, Mark has covered several SEC championship games, bowl games, College World Series, and a Final Four. Mark's interview subjects range from Peyton Manning, Jerry Rice, Brett Favre, Archie Griffin, to Vince Steele, and Robin Roberts. Mark currently displays his skills on his YouTube channel, Mark Rogers TV, which houses over 2,000 college football videos, where Mark brings a passionate view and analytical eye to college football discussion. As a manager in production operations at ESPN, Mark grows and develops the staff through large-scale training initiatives, leadership opportunities, and one-on-one relationship building while creating and implementing and overseeing operational procedures and workflows. So, Mark Rogers, we're going to turn it over to you. You got the floor. Thank you for being here with us. Yeah.
So all of that sounded great, except for I should probably leave the 23 years of experience out of it. Man, that sounds like a long time. That makes me feel old. But thanks for inviting me. I appreciate this. This is fun to get together and share some of my career highlights or just my perspective on what I've experienced, and hopefully it relates to you, and then we can talk back and forth. So I mentioned to Amy when we were talking about reminiscing about certain people that just about a month ago, I was contacted by my former station in Mississippi, WCBI, where I was a sports anchor and reporter, initially hired to be a weekend sports anchor, and then was promoted to sports director for the next 6 years. And the Mississippi State basketball team, since we were just talking about the Final Four just a few minutes ago, the Mississippi State basketball team made the Final Four in 1996, and that was the only time Mississippi State in its history ever made the Final Four. So this being 20 years, WCBI is producing a anniversary special, so they wanted to get my perspective since I was the guy that was on all the flights and all the satellite trucks doing all the live shots and the reporting from all the steps leading up to the Final Four, where they lost to. I think there's a Syracuse fan there, somebody somewhere. Yeah, so they made it actually back in 1996 too. If you weren't aware of that, you might have been a little young at that point, that Syracuse beat Mississippi State in the Final Four. So that was a great time, and fortunately I just knocked out that interview in the ESPN newsroom. They were nice enough to turn that facility over to me for 10 or 15 minutes last week and knock out some thoughts about Mississippi State making the Final Four. And when you look back upon a career, and one of the highlights of my career was definitely making that run with Mississippi State, you kind of blanked out on me, so I had to wake up my computer again. So it brings to mind a lot of things that have gone on since then. So I kind of, in preparing for this just a little bit, I try not to be too rehearsed, so I just jotted a couple things down, is going back to when I started, when Amy and I started, you know, this is back like early 90s. So the thing at that point was, how do you gain access into a television station? Because it was such a daunting task. Sure, you went to college, you got the degree, but then what do you do? And for as much competition is out there right now that didn't exist 25 years ago, the big advantage that you guys have is just the social media aspect of making contact with people, because you don't need the big fancy TV studio, you don't need the power plant to put on a production now. And in turn, you also don't need to go knock on somebody's door, a general manager's door, which is almost impossible to get through, because when I went for my first job out of college, that's pretty much what I did. I just drove around Ohio and Western Pennsylvania and knocked on station doors and hoped that the news director, the general manager, would talk to me. And depending on the size of the station, I finally got a job that way. But now I notice with what I'm attempting to do and launching with my own internet webcast is that there are a lot of nice people out there, a lot of accommodating people. They might be difficult to get to, they might be very busy, but whatever you want to do, definitely don't let those barriers, don't think that those people that you need to talk to are not accessible. You may have to make 100 attempts. You may have to try 100 people to get the one breakthrough to talk to the one person who would be, regardless of what you want to do. For me, it's an interview subject. So I'm now in contact with 10 or 15 NFL players who follow me on Twitter because of pursuing just different avenues of social media. So I'm not a huge fan in and of myself of social media because you see a lot of nasty stuff on there and it becomes a pain and you get kind of absorbed with it. But it's kind of a necessary item if you're going to brand yourself and network and gain some opportunities out there. So it's definitely very much a good thing. Looking at my situation in breaking into television, I interned at an ABC station in Akron, Ohio. That's where I grew up, in Ohio. And really, I was extremely fortunate because most interns go to a TV station and you're not allowed to do much. So after I got through the months and months of logging tape at the time, and going through all the internship type activities, in practicing my stand-up, I was then allowed to go on air and kind of broke my way in on air in this ABC affiliate, and that really built my resume tape and gave me the opportunity to get my first job at WNCO, which I just mentioned. I was there for 3 years, and the funny part of that situation was it was just a cold call. I just pulled in the driveway, just knocked on the door, just walked in, and asked to meet with the news director and the general manager or the station manager, and I didn't realize that they were looking for somebody, that they were actively looking for a news anchor reporter, and I was a big sports guy, and that's all I wanted to do. I was tunnel vision from the time I was like 12 years old. I just want to be a sportscaster. I didn't consider anything else. And when I talk to young people now, I'm actually a bit envious and encourage them to explore different things, because a lot of people will tell you once they get into college, oh, I'm kind of worried because I don't know what I want to do. And I think that's kind of a positive thing because you get to explore and experience a bunch of different things and try things out. On the flip side, I was like tunnel vision. That's all I wanted to do. So I told them, I'm a sportscaster. I want to do sports. And they asked me about news, and I said, I hate news. I despise it. And that was my feeling about news at the time. And the next thing they said was, well, we got a news anchor position open. And so I thought, well, I just inserted my foot in mouth and that's done, forget that. But I ended up getting the job and asked them later, how in the world did you hire me? Because I told you I despised the news. And they ended up telling me that I read the teleprompter better than the other candidate. So that was a great experience. I was there for 3 years in Ashland, Ohio, a little bitty TV and radio station there. And in addition to doing the news, I did play-by-play for high school sports on the weekends, Division II, football, basketball. We did all sorts of crazy stuff. We'd do swim meets and drag racing and parades. The very first day I worked there, they had me announce a parade. And I'd never announced a parade before. I was like 23 years old and had no idea how to announce a parade, and especially on my first day on the job. But they just gave me a list of floats, and I was on the air for like 2 or 3 hours announcing a parade. So just interesting experiences there. So I then went to a WCBI in Mississippi, as Amy talked about, and we met there. She was a reporter and anchor there, and just the experience there was just amazing. I consider that just in terms of going to work and doing what I wanted to do my whole life, that was in some ways the best job I ever had, because it was a small enough outfit that there wasn't too much authority coming down on me dictating what I did for a sportscast every night. So I basically did whatever I wanted. There might have been 3 times in 6 years where a news director said, or a station manager said, you need to go cover that tennis tournament or that golf tournament. Otherwise, I did whatever I wanted. Plus, we had the resources just to go live. So I guess my next point in all this is be on the cutting edge in regards to what's new and what's accessible and what's out there right now. So at that point, we're talking mid-90s, stations were just going live on a regular basis out in the field. So what I did was fire up that satellite or microwave truck every day possible, which we were going live from almost every Mississippi State baseball game, basketball game, football game. Nobody heard of going to National Signing Day. So for those of you who aren't up on college football, first week of February, that Wednesday, they sign all the big prospects out of high school, and that's National Signing Day for football, and it's a big deal. Well, everyone prior to me that ran the sports department just sat at the desk and read off the names and showed the highlights and maybe ran around town and got a couple interviews during the day. But we decided, let's go to the coach's office. You know, the worst thing they could tell us is no. But we ended up going to Mississippi State football coach's office, doing a live shot every year on National Signing Day, and me pitching to the other sports guy who would be at the Ole Miss's football office, sitting there in the office, right there with the coach talking about the prospect. So the live element and bringing the viewer right to the situation just seemed to really work for us. So we went crazy on live shots. We were doing live shots constantly. I think the other great experience working there, in addition to just being on live and understanding that it's not taped, you can't make a mistake, you just have to keep going. If you butcher a name, if you lose your train of thought, too bad, you just need to keep going. Was the news portion of sports. So unfortunately, all three major schools that we followed during the time I was there, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and Alabama, all went through NCAA investigations. Football programs, basketball programs, all got in trouble, had violations. So being a news reporter, I had to really up my game in regards to being a news reporter. We had situations where a couple of basketball players got arrested. We had a drowning of a football player and covered the funeral and, you know, the actual day of the drowning, the news story. So just a lot of those things come to mind as well. Then I totally switched gears and I went to ESPN, and I started off in the programming department. So I worked in a subgroup of the programming department. When I say programming, I'm not talking computers. I'm talking about the scheduling of the programs and the analysis of the programs and where they should be stacked and what shows should air on what networks when. And I was kind of in part of a subgroup that dealt with the guidelines and conditions in the moment. So it was nice for the main programming department that would book the 24-hour schedule and then go home at 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon. But we were the team that executed the guidelines and conditions, because if you're familiar with live sports, you know the games never end on time. And there's always a rain delay, or there's always a best-of-3 series that only went 2 games, so you need to figure out what you're going to do to fill the gap at the 3rd game. And now it just gets even more and more complicated with ESPN, ESPN2, ESPNU, SEC Network, our news network. We've got games flying all over the place, and we are making decisions on the fly, and you can imagine how complicated that is with remote and with production and with transmission, trying to get the right parts of the country to the right games and juggling all that. But so that, in a nutshell, is what I've been doing for the last 14 years. So initially that was kind of in the trenches, and over the last 10 years or so, that's been in production operations management. So we've got a department of 550, and we're pretty much at the core of what ESPN does. We're the studio personnel, the production room personnel, the producers, the directors, the camera operators, the video operators, the content editors that edit all the highlights and everything you see, and so forth. So that kind of brings you up to date in terms of what I'm involved in and what I do. I definitely would like to take some questions if you have any questions for me, or just maybe some comments too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you like hang out around the anchors of ESPN at all?
Okay, I think I caught that. I see the anchors all the time. So we're in a digital center that's got 3 or 4 floors. All the studios are right there. We just built a second digital center, which is 40% larger than the first one that went up in 2004. And that's got all new Sports Center studios, NFL studios. So yeah, they're walking around all over the place. Athletes are walking around all over the place. So you see those Sports Center commercials, and yeah, there's a little hyperbole and hijinks there, but a lot of that's true in terms of people walking around all the time. Definitely. Oh, that's a great question. So I had kind of left the business. So when I left WCBI, I didn't have a TV job. I interviewed a few places. I was offered a couple jobs that just didn't meet the salary requirements of a wife and 2 kids. So I didn't head off to Lincoln, Nebraska, and I didn't head off to Portland, Maine. I remember that was another one. Evansville, Indiana. I was offered a job in Knoxville, Tennessee. So anyway, I didn't stay in television. And even though I loved television and wanted to stay in television, that didn't happen. So I went and was an assistant manager at a Walmart for a year and a half. Now, you talk about some stories, but I don't think that really floats in the confines of this forum here. So I did that for a year and a half. Then actually, my wife at the time, she got on the internet and she looked at job postings, and she went to ESPN and she saw a job posting for a job that said, basically, we have 2 qualifications, that you have producer skills and you have an exhaustive knowledge of sports. And so I sent my resume and cover letter, and they called me, and I had a couple phone interviews, and then I flew in for an interview. And what was kind of interesting was this was right after 9/11. I flew a couple weeks after 9/11, and they called me and told me that they hired me, and I was about to quit my job, and I was headed in to quit my job that day, and ESPN called me back and said, we've had a hiring freeze, so don't quit your job. So I was glad that they called, because they didn't hire me then for another couple months, but finally it came through, and yeah, that's how I started. What's that?
Javon's got something up here.
What?
You were investigated?
You were responsible for the investigation whenever a sports player drowned. You did that story?
So yeah, this was obviously a sad story. This was in the middle of the summer, right before Mississippi State football camp was going to break, and their star running back, who actually led the SEC in rushing the year before, Kiefer McGee, drowned. I was headed back from vacation. Boy, what do I remember about that? And yeah, we were scrambling all over the place to find out information. Was I part of the investigation? No, they didn't really involve me in the investigation. I was more or less trying to track those people down to get as much information as possible. But yeah, it's kind of all, as Amy can attest to, when something like that happens, it's kind of all hands on deck, because that's a sports story, but more so it's a news story. And so all the news people were involved as well, but they need the sports perspective as well. So that was one of the tougher, it's not like I knew the guy extremely well, but I had interviewed him several times, 8 or 10 times. And that was one of the tougher sportscasts to deliver. I remember that being very difficult to deliver. I tried to write a commentary that would honor him and be of some value. And that was difficult to deliver. I remember that.
Another question, was the investigation done by the FCC?
Was the investigation done by the FCC?
Oh boy, that's been so long ago. I don't remember. That was basically just handled by local police. There was no foul play in that, so there wasn't a whole lot to investigate. He actually dove in after a child, is what happened there. And that's how that drowning occurred. So there wasn't a whole lot of mystery involved in that. So I'm kind of interested what you guys, and I know everybody's an individual and has your own aspirations and what you're focused on, but what are some of the career aspirations or what you guys are involved in now and trying to do?
Mine's kind of sport related. I don't know. I really like sports, and I really like writing. So I made that like a career, but I do want to do some sports writing, maybe.
Writing seems to be a lost art, unfortunately. Rick Riley, he's one of the top writers for Sports Illustrated. Another great benefit to being at ESPN is they bring in great guests, and you can go to a luncheon and sit down with, trying to think of tons of people I've gone to see speak. Jim Brown, oh man, a lot of them escape me right now, but really good guest speakers that'll come, and you can sit there in a small gathering, a lunch gathering, and sit there and hear them. But one in particular, Rick Riley, who writes for Sports Illustrated, I remember him talking about, the writing aspect of it and how different it is now. Everybody's a writer. Everybody can be a writer. All you need to do is start your website, start your blog, you're a writer. Are you any good? Probably not, but you can start and everybody can rant, and that's a great thing. It's kind of dumb things down, and you can't trust everything you read, and not that you always could, but he had a statistic that the average blog is read by 2.5 people. So basically the person that's writing it, and then they get their mom and maybe a half of another person to write it. So there's a ton of stuff out there. So that's the big challenge for me and anybody else who wants to start some type of online business is getting interest, because there's so much competition. So I know in what I'm doing on YouTube, it seems rather minuscule in comparison to these people that have millions of viewers, but I've had like 300,000 views and 700 or 800 people subscribe, so it's growing at least.
So Mark, tell us a little bit about your YouTube thing that you just started.
Yeah, so this is kind of cool. So this was like in 2008, 2009 that somebody got a hold of me. I was at the time in this management position that I'm currently in, and somebody at ESPN.com got a hold of me, and God bless whoever told them that I could broadcast, because I didn't know this person. I had no connections to .com, but they contacted me and said, we hear that you've got experience and we'd like for you to do some things. So I had to audition, and I also had to give them a resume tape. And at the time, that was like 8 years after I'd been off the air. So all that stuff was rather old. But so they wanted the audition. Everything worked out well. So for a span of about a year, I had freelance assignments with ESPN.com where they would have me come in, let's say, on a Thursday night, and it was a big NBA Major League Baseball night. It's the middle of April. And I would do anchor leads that they would tape, and then I would just sit around and watch the games and make sure I was on top of the games and the stats coming down. And then I would get what was called a shot sheet. If you're unfamiliar with that, the game's over, and a producer, a PA, usually a production assistant, will just cut up the highlights. And let's say you got 5 highlights from the Yankees-Red Sox game, and they'll jot down just the basic information. First inning, Derek Jeter single, scores a run, 1-0 Yankees. Just give you the basic information, and then you, as the sportscaster, need to embellish on that and provide your own style and stick to it. And so I go jump in the voice booth, and they would want to upload these to .com as soon as possible. So as soon as the game over, I get a shot sheet. I go in the audio booth and knock out the highlights. So they'd give me a nice check for doing that, and I was doing that kind of on the side, but the real job got in the way. And at some point, somebody got a hold of me that I'm actually doing a production show with on Mondays these days, and said, Mark, it's not 1975. You don't need a big fancy studio. You don't need all this stuff. You can do this yourself. So that's what really gave me the idea to do this. And I still don't have the aesthetics and the set and all the stuff that I'd like to have at this point, but I've connected with consistently 50 to 75 bloggers from some major sites across the country to cover college football. And it's called Mark Rogers TV because when I started it, I didn't know what I wanted to talk about. And I narrowed it down to college football. And now it's just a kind of a social media game of trying to get the word out there as much as possible. So I do a production show with a guy, Marty McPadden, who worked at ESPN for 19 years in production operations. So we give tips about on-camera presentation and also behind the camera production work, and we do that on Mondays. And then I've got a few other shows that I do in addition to a show I do with a girl, Macy Golder, that we do talking about sports and pop culture and whatever we come across on Thursday night. So if you love college football, I got a channel, Mark Rogers TV on YouTube, and most of those videos also get posted to other sites, SB Nation sites inside the ACC and some other places.
What's the kind of like the Auburn Alabama game, like the return touchdown? What's the craziest sports moment you've ever witnessed, like while reporting a game?
Okay, I'll just talk about whatever comes off the top of my head. I was somebody interviewed me in LA the other day and asked me kind of something similar. The first thing that came to mind, this wasn't wild, but it's kind of historic. I was standing behind the end zone line under the goalpost when Peyton Manning threw his first collegiate touchdown. So I was in the stadium at Mississippi State where Peyton Manning actually didn't start the game. Todd Helton, who was later the first baseman of the Colorado Rockies, started the game, and Manning relieved him. The other thing that comes to mind, this isn't necessarily a crazy moment in terms of the game, but it's a crazy moment for us. So we're at the SEC championship game. It's 1998. Mississippi State taking on Tennessee. Tennessee was #1 in the country, so they needed to win that game to go to the BCS National Championship game. And they were losing by a touchdown in the fourth quarter. They eventually came back and won. So I'm way up in the press box at the Georgia Dome, and my cameraman's on the sideline. And I had told him exactly when we needed to leave to make the live shot. So we've got a live shot with a satellite truck and remote outside the stadium, and so we've got to be on at like 10:20. So I told him exactly, leave the sideline at whatever it was, 9:45 to be at the live shot. So I'm sitting there, and I've got a little bit more time than he does because he's got a lot of stuff that he needs to set up operationally. So I'm sitting there, and I can see him on the sideline, and I'm seeing 9:40 when I told him to leave, and 9:45 and 9:50, and I'm still standing down at the sideline, and I'm like, what's he doing? And so I bolted for the elevator, and the elevator was jammed because I'm in a press box, and there's 3 minutes left in the game, so all the media hardly ever sees the end of these games. That's the thing, because they're going from the press box to the locker rooms, and so we miss a lot of ends of games. But the elevator situation was ridiculous. So I ended up running down ramp by ramp by ramp, like running as fast as I could outside the Georgia Dome, and not knowing the layout of the Georgia Dome. I don't think I took like the best route outside the stadium and ran halfway around the stadium, and it was just a crazy deal. I had to run to the sideline, grab him by the shoulder, and be like, "Let's go." And so we barely made our live shot. That one comes to mind for some reason, but you know, as Amy can attest to, there were a lot of live shots that almost didn't come off. But another one was at a Mississippi State baseball game, and Amy, you can probably relate to this. Jeffrey would always tell me when I would do a live sportscast at the Mississippi State baseball game, he'd be like, "What if the truck goes down? What are we going to do?" And he's like, "We need a backup sportscast." And I'd be like, "I don't have time to give you a backup when there's a 1% chance that this is going to go down," and never goes down. So I never supplied them with a sportscast backup. But I'm out at the Mississippi State baseball game, and we're having issues with the live truck. And I'm looking at my watch, and I'm thinking, what do I do? Do I stay here, and most likely they're going to get it fixed and we'll be fine, or I drive 85 miles an hour back to the station. I get there and I don't have a sportscast. I got like nothing, you know, because I'm going to be out here just talking about the game and interviewing the players and coaches. So I ended up having to drive back to the station and driving like a maniac. And I made it back to the station. I had no shirt and tie or anything. I just had my polo on, and I had absolutely no sportscast prepared. And that kind of taught me my lesson right there.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so do you have a preference between pro sports and college?
The thing I love about college sports is, except for, and we see this a little bit more these days, that a kid will finish up his eligibility at one school and transfer and then have one extra season at another school. We see that a little bit more with some decent players, but not that much. It's very rare. So the nice thing about loving college sports is that you know that if you're a Syracuse fan, that your favorite player, he's always going to be a Syracuse player. He's going to leave Syracuse, whether he makes the pros or you never see him again. He was always a Syracuse player. If you're a diehard Pittsburgh Steelers fan and you hate the Cincinnati Bengals, well, some of your favorite players might be playing for the Bengals 3 years from now. You know, it's a business. So that's the one thing I like about college sports. I'm not going to say it's pure because we don't need to be naive here. It's big business, but at least the players play for their schools, and that's the only place you're ever going to see them. But obviously, if you want to see the game played at its best, at its highest level, and you really understand the sport, whether it's football or basketball being the most popular college and professional combination, you can see the obvious difference in how good the NFL's played versus even an SEC football game. And the same thing with the NBA versus what you see. I have all sorts of NBA friends that almost can't watch the NCAA tournament just because they think the basketball is so bad. But it's so exciting. How can you not watch it?
Well, do you ever think that, because a lot of people say that the NBA defense is super weak compared to college defense?
Oh, I totally agree with that. Those NBA players decide to start playing defense with about 4 minutes on the clock. You know, they hope to keep it close, and then let's start guarding somebody. Or in a playoff game, it's a little bit different. You definitely see a different NBA in the playoffs than you see the rest of the season, where watching an NCAA tournament game and then watching a regular season college basketball game, the intensity's pretty much the same. You know, turn on an ACC game. You guys are an ACC country. You know, watch Duke and North Carolina play in a regular season game, or you don't even have to go that high up the rung. You know, watch Virginia play Syracuse in the regular season, then watch them play in the NCAA tournament. Can't see a difference in effort levels. I can't. But in the NBA, yeah, the playoffs start. You can tell the NBA playoffs started.
Yes, Steve, go ahead.
With your career starting out in news and doing what you do now, is there anything you would have done differently?
Is there anything I would have done differently?
Right.
Wow. Aren't there a lot of things that we all would have done differently? Oh, wow. I am glad for the opportunities I seized because I saw people around me that were a lot more go-getter than I was, and I also saw those people that didn't do quite as much. So that's my main point in all this, is certainly get out there and do as much as you possibly can. I know that in college, I was slow to really diving in and doing as much as I possibly could have in terms of covering the local teams, the teams on campus, and doing all of that. I just didn't feel as good as some of the you know, when I was a sophomore, that the seniors, they were really good. They looked polished. They were running our little campus station, and I can't compete with them. Well, I should have dove in much sooner. Oh, wow. Things I would have done differently. Well, I would have started all this internet stuff a lot sooner. You know, this could have been done, you know, we all would have gotten on the ground floor of whatever, you know, a lot sooner, bought Apple stock, you know, or anything like that. But yeah, if I could have seen this coming, Yeah, I wouldn't have started doing this in 2010. I would have started in, the internet was around and some version of live streaming in the 90s. Definitely.
What kind of degree did you get?
My degree is in broadcast journalism at Kent State University. And I was so into sports that we would have a field of concentration that we had to name. And so for most people, it was law or it was the second degree. For me, I said, can I major in sportscasting? And they said, well, we've never had anybody do that, but they kind of made that up. So that was my area of concentration was sportscasting, but I had a broadcast journalism degree. And that's another good lesson, I think, for everybody is, hey, if you're out there and you're making connections and you're really invested in what you're doing, there are so many people in television, for example, that don't have television-related degrees. They just worked hard and met different people and kind of made their way. We hire people that, sure, most of the people we hire have television-related degrees, but we hire people that were in marketing or some other field. So, don't be discouraged that you can't make some kind of jump to another field.
You were in Mississippi sports for so long, you become a Ole Miss or Mississippi State fan at all?
That's funny when you say that. The first thing that comes to mind is, and it sounds like you're a pretty big sports fan, is that in 1998, Bryce Drew, Valpo, made one of the most historic shots in NCAA history. They threw it in. They were a big underdog to Ole Miss. They tossed it down the court. He caught it. He threw it up almost three-quarters court probably. No, he was just inside the half-court line and threw it in. So I'm sitting on I got a great view of this. I'm covering Ole Miss. I'm sitting on like media row. I'm right behind the coaches. And most of the people that and you become very close to other media members, especially when you go on a run like that. So a lot of guys from Memphis and other towns close and other markets close to us because you see them constantly. And even during the course of the season, you're trading satellite tapes and you're helping each other out and doing different things. But I just remember, okay, shot went in. Wow, this is amazing. I got up. I headed to the locker room. I'm knocking out my interviews, and everybody else is just kind of stunned because they're rooting for Ole Miss. They're Ole Miss guys. They're Mississippi guys for the most part, or they just got attached to the team. And I remember one of them grabbing me because I'm just sitting there. I'm cutting my package. I got to be on at 6 o'clock. And they're like, you don't really care, do you? I didn't think of it. I was like, oh, I'm just doing my job. And I got attached to some of the players and the teams after you cover, you figure a basketball season starts mid-October and you go to the first practice and you interview these guys, especially in basketball with more games being played than football, interview these guys 2 or 3 times a week and go to all the games and go to an NCAA tournament run that goes to April. Yeah, you start to root for them. There's no question about that. But I wouldn't say right now that I'm a Ole Miss or Mississippi State fan, but I'm an Ohio State fan, actually. That's where I grew up. But, yeah, that particular group of players, I think broadcasters and media people, some get attached to, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Do you have a favorite college basketball coach?
College basketball coach. It's not a real popular answer right now. He's not my favorite coach, but I think one of the better coaches is Rick Pitino and has been for a long time. Some of the stuff that he's allowed to happen at Louisville, it's kind of shocking. College basketball coach. trying to think if I have any favorite college basketball coach. I think Tom Izzo is amazing at Michigan State. I was shocked, like everybody else, that they got knocked out in the first round because it just seems like you can pencil them into the Final Four every other year. I like to see those coaches that do more with less. It would be interesting to take a Mike Krzyzewski, take him out of Duke, and I know that he built that program, and Duke wasn't Duke before he got there, but wouldn't it be just interesting to do a test and see Mike Krzyzewski takes over Auburn, and, you know, how good is Auburn going to be in 2 or 3 years just because Mike Krzyzewski's there?
Not Jeff Fisher, but the coach at San Diego State.
Yeah, Jeff Fisher. They used to be at Michigan.
Yeah, that's kind of like what he did, and they were undefeated a couple years ago.
Yeah, San Diego State, yeah, they were never a basketball power. Yeah, he's done a great job there. No doubt. Yeah.
Who are the NFL players that like you keep up with on Twitter, like follow you and stuff? Or any of them like
that's really funny too, because it's my Twitter philosophy. I hate to admit I would have a Twitter philosophy because I don't think it's really that important, but that I don't follow a bunch of famous people because they're not going to follow me back, and so I just try to build some level of relationship with the people that I do follow. So yeah, there's like 10 or 15 NFL players that follow me on Twitter, and I then in turn followed them, but I didn't follow them first, so I find it interesting, and then I trade direct messages with them. The first one, like Pac-Man Jones started following me. Trey Waynes, who isn't real famous, but he was the first-round pick of the Minnesota Vikings out of Michigan State last year. Tommy Harris, who was a first-round pick and played for the Bears. I'm trying to think who else. There's about 10 or 12. Max Williams, he was a second-round pick of the Ravens last year. He started to follow me on Twitter, and they're very nice. Very nice. They'll conduct a conversation. It's difficult to interview those guys, though. Then they point you to their agent, and the agent doesn't return phone calls, and it becomes kind of a difficult thing trying to interview those guys. But you know, again, I encourage you guys to reach out to anybody, even if you think they're not accessible, because, you know, think of college football coaches, and I know from covering them 15 years ago how difficult it was to, like, if I didn't belong to a TV station, if I was just a guy out there on the internet, you would have no shot of talking to these guys. But every spring, I will write a letter, obviously a form letter, and I'll just copy and paste, and I'll send it out to every major college football coach, all 120 that are in FBS, and I'll pick up 10 or 12 or 15 interviews online. I just talked to the Washington State or the Oregon State head coach a couple weeks ago. So you would think that's too big a program. They're in the Pac-12 to talk to a guy that's just doing a YouTube show on the internet. So you never know. I know I'm going to get off here, and then I'm going to think of like 8 things I wanted to say, but that's the way it goes.
What's your Twitter ad name?
At Mark Rogers TV. So you guys follow me, I'll follow you. But I usually don't necessarily do that. And if I don't follow you, send me a tweet and say, you promised to follow me. What's that?
Do you have any other social media accounts?
I do the standard Facebook, which right now I technically have like 3,000 Facebook friends. And do you think they're all friends? No, like 300 real friends, and so I'm probably going to change that at some point. The object there was to move them over to Mark Rogers TV, my Facebook page, and and do that. So yeah, I'm not huge into social media. I know there's a ton of other stuff. I actually just discovered this platform that you guys should check out if you like to do any kind of internet shows. It's called Blab. So look up blab.im, and what's really cool is you stream out live, and you can have 3 other people at the same time, and it's got a Twitter-like feed on the side where people can ask questions, comment, and so I started to do some of my shows. I do a show with this girl, Macy Golder, on Thursday nights, and we use Blab, and it's kind of fun.
Hey, Mark, quick question. Whenever you're putting on video segments of different highlights that you're showing and stuff on your Mark Rogers TV site, where are you getting that video from? Is ESPN letting you use that, or where are you getting that from?
So I don't use any video on there.
Oh, okay.
Because YouTube will check you, and they'll make it known that you can't use copyrighted video. So all of mine is just talking heads. And that's if you guys jump on Mark Rogers TV on YouTube, do not expect too much from a production quality standpoint. All that stuff needs to be worked on, and people are telling me that all the time. An open, a sting, a production elements, graphics, all that stuff. I need to work on all that stuff. Yeah.
Anything else, guys? All right. Thank you so much, Mark. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's fun.
Thank you for taking the time. We appreciate it.
Okay. Bye, Amy. Bye, everyone.
All right, I'll be in touch with you, Mark.
All right, thanks, Don.
OH.
Oh, nice. IO.
Yeah.
All right. See ya.
See you, Mark. See you. All right, guys. Good deal. You need to take you want a quick break, or you guys good?
Yeah, I was getting sleepy.
You guys, we'll pull this table back out here and put the chairs back in, but you guys want to take a quick break now, since we're here at this point? Can you what? Yeah, sure. Let me, I'm sorry, would you grab this? Let me let, Officer Curry know that,